Welcome to today's episode. It is Monday, January 13th. You're listening to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. And boy, have I been waiting for this one. On Thursday, we watched Noah Wyle, classic ER doctor Noah Wyle, return to the emergency department in a new medical drama, The Pitt. He plays senior attending Dr. Michael Robby Rabinavitch. I assume that's because they don't want his name being anything close to John Carter or John Carter III, which was his title in ER. Each episode covers an hour of Dr. Robby's 15-hour shift at Pittsburgh Trauma Teaching Hospital starting at 7 a.m. Even though Wyle gets top billing, this is an ensemble piece with interns, nurses, social workers, hospital execs, a nonstop procession of patients all vying for the audience's attention. In one of the few negative reviews for this show, 2 stars from The Guardian's Benjamin Lee, he mentions the overkill of headline-ready shock cases in one shift. I completely agree. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to keep track because there's like several, at least over a dozen storylines, I feel like.
We're 2 hours in, and we've already had a possible hate crime where a woman was pushed into an oncoming subway and had to have her leg pulled off, not sawed off, pulled off.
What a crazy scene. I love that scene. That was great.
Okay. The overriding of a DNR, DNI, not by a doctor, but the family of an Alzheimer's patient. A case of floating face, which I'd never heard of before, very rare, but they just snapped that puppy back into place. A sickle cell attack where the EMTs are treating the patient like a belligerent cops, yelling at them to stop resisting. That was weird. A child overdosing on THC edibles. Again, this is 7 a.m., 8 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Our chief attending main character chasing a troubled teen out into the street because the teen didn't want to talk about his feelings. It's ludicrous. It's insane.
Well, don't forget the triathlete.
I wasn't going to get into all of the crazy stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, he's continually slipping into cardiac arrest. And we also know that it's going to be, even from the very beginning, a crazy shift because we have Dr. Michael Rabinavitch. He walks in.
Just call him Robby. Dr.
Robby. Dr. Robby, he walks in, he goes to the top floor, and he has to talk Jack Abbott down from possibly committing suicide. I don't know if he was actually going to do it or not. I think it was supposed to be kind of in a gray area where you weren't really
I honestly could have done without that scene. I think they only kept it in to show that Sean Haddisy, or however you pronounce his last name, is in the show. Because he doesn't appear in the next 2 episodes. He's more of a reoccurring character, but he's pretty famous, and I think that they just wanted to say, you'll get to see him eventually.
This was like if the bear was set in a hospital and all took place in one day. More specifically, the bear from the first season or even just the pilot where it seemed like they...
Chaos.
Throughout the whole entire show. In fact, I thought that the bear, I remember when we were doing the review for it, I thought the bear was going to be set in one day, just kind of like the Pitt is.
Yes, if you make the cousins smarter and then have like them running around, absolutely, they could all be doctors.
And then you also have 24 in an ER room. I mean, because it literally, the episodes' names are 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Also like ER, the pilot there, which is called 24 Hours, which kind of does the same exact thing that this show does, except it goes through his full shift in the pilot.
We're gonna talk a lot about comparisons throughout this whole thing. I did want to finish the point, though, that like it's not just the bad reviews that we're mentioning, that there was so much crazy headline stuff going on. The Rolling Stones even said that this is insane that this much would happen in one shift. But I'm all in, and I think you are too, right?
Yes.
Pull out the popcorn. I would have binged half of this series by now if it had been available, because it feels like such, for me, a bingeable show.
See, okay, so that's where you and I differ, because I really, really like the show, but I don't know if I could binge a show like this because of just how much heavy stuff goes on in the episodes themselves.
I think they really do a good job balancing, though, the humor, the wit, the doctors playing off each other. Yes, you get death, and yes, you have... like the hospital might shut down pretty soon because the arguments that the attending was having with the hospital administrator. But at the same time, it just felt like there was a certain amount of heart, maybe not as much as what you'd see in the classic ER scenario, but at the same time, you're not seeing the same amount of romance and drama. And that's what I like. I like that it's concentrating on the medical stuff and how quickly it's moving. And it's just, like I said earlier, chaos. That's engrossing, and that's what makes me want to binge it.
And there's just a dozen characters or main characters.
Right. If you get tired of one, they're always going to pass you over to another.
But that's the thing. I never really did get tired of one. I didn't find any of them annoying. I didn't find any of them bothersome. I didn't think that anyone made a choice, and this might change in the episodes to come, but I didn't think anyone made a choice that I was just like, why would they do that? This would be so easy to communicate it with each other.
It's a far cry from the doc series, which was way slower, way less medical stuff, way more forced, like I guess, tension between anxiousness and antagonism between the main doctor and everybody else. At least with this show, there's no like super doc. There's no miracle worker. You're not having House going around treating every single patient.
No Last Days of Potomac Gray cure for Alzheimer's.
Right. It feels more real in that sense. It's also good PSA timing because open enrollment ends January 15th if you're in the U.S. for healthcare. So don't forget about that. Here's one of the reviews. Why this show connects with people must stem from America's public escalating anxieties over healthcare in the wake of the utter confusion and helplessness in Washington. People want to be assured that basic supports will be available. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Well, that's from the 1994 ER first season review. It's 30 years old, and it still applies today. One thing I didn't know about, and it makes a lot of sense about these type of shows, ER and this, is that they had a medical boot camp that they had to, like, just imagine having to act for the first time as a doctor or a medical student and having to know all these terms and where to go and at least semi-look realistic, because I'm sure they're getting some stuff wrong. But, like, yeah, you have to...
It makes sense, though, with all the medical jargon that was going on here. Even though I didn't understand a good amount of it, I was still invested the whole entire time because you're really wanting to see these doctors save the patients.
Let's talk about the interns for a second, because that's where some criticism has laid on, like, whether or not these characters felt real or flat. What did you think of the interns?
I think my favorite one out of all of them was Trinity Santos.
Was that the brash, like, one that...
Yep. She's the intern that comes up with nicknames for other people.
You know what she reminds me of? A lot of this stuff actually reminded me of Scrubs, because there were like little tidbits here and there. Like,
you know, when I was seeing the hospital, it was impossible not to think St. Denis Medical.
Oh, I'm talking about actual like thematic things.
Right.
Like there was a part in this episode, in the first two episodes, where one of the new doctors was told by I think it was Dennis, was told by the nurse that he should order an echocardiogram or like something, an ultrasound or something like that, right? And he followed her advice. There's literally an episode in the first season of Scrubs where JD's narration, because remember it was like all in his head, you see when you start out the nurses know more than you, but after a few months the training kicks in and you both feel the dynamic shift. And my mind went directly there. Also the arguments with Robby and the hospital exec, that was Dr. Kelso versus Dr. Cox, when Dr. Kelso would be representing the hospital, the profit over patient, best interest, that type of argument. And then the overly cocky medical student or intern, that was Aziz Ansari in one of the later seasons of Scrubs.
Wasn't Aziz Ansari only in like the 8th season?
But he got burned pretty quickly because he came in there too hot and heavy thinking that he knew everything. And so he started blowing stuff off. But the brashness of this girl, you could tell she was rubbing some doctors the wrong way. And it's going to come back into play. Hopefully, she's not going to get fired in the first day, I would not assume. But she did give someone like morphine when she wasn't given permission.
Yeah, I think, but her and Frank Langdon, who I think is also one of my favorites out of all of them.
Yeah,
they're going to have some type of tiff.
Course.
Yeah, I mean, like it was shown in the second episode, but I'm sure somewhere down the line it's going to like hit where they just get in a huge argument.
So that's your favorite intern. What about the daughter of one of the other hospital doctors, the one who came in there, like the
Victoria
super genius
Giavatti.
20-year-old, yes, who fainted when she first saw in her defense, if you see a leg being pulled off someone, and
the way that it was just so like, I mean, with the sound and everything.
Have you ever seen ground beef just pulled apart? That's what it looked like.
Also the floating face was kind of gross to me as well. But Victoria Giavatti, yeah. So I was trying to figure out if she would really get that much hate from other doctors for fainting, because
it wasn't really the other doctors. It was the one that you're talking about, the intern, her fellow medical student, right?
Yeah, but even the other doctors, I think like even Michael was like kind of talking, was not talking great about her behind her back.
Robby was being a little dismissive, being like, oh, look at these newbies. They don't know what they're doing. But then when he found out that she was actually the daughter of one of the main doctors at the hospital, he kind of like changed his tone on that one. I don't know if you recognized any of them, but like your favorite is from Goosebumps. She was in the first season of
I thought that was her.
Ago.
She was younger in Goosebumps.
She was different.
Yeah.
And then also the sort of socially awkward one, the one she's actually gotten a lot of positive remarks from critics. The one who steps out, the one who worked at the vet place before going there and said that she assumes everybody should do that. kind of serious, not understanding of like humor.
Right.
Sorry, I know I'm saying like weird stuff, but she's from American Vandal.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Season
even
2.
remember. Okay, season 2. That
Right.
actually makes more sense. I think I know who she played.
Okay.
But also, I was really, really surprised to learn that Cassie McKay, when she said she was a 42-year-old second-year resident, I was like, she's 42 years old? But I think
Yeah.
the actual actress is 43.
Yeah,
So,
no, she is. She played in Chucky in like a lot of that series, and I think even in some of the movies. But I think the character arc that they gave her was kind of interesting because she was talking about. She seemed like she knew everything that she was doing, kind of like a stable figure that whenever she was on the screen, you were like, okay, she knows what's up.
yeah, very
And then
nice.
suddenly, in the second episode, it's revealed what?
She has an ankle monitor.
Yeah, she's under sort of house arrest or like work arrest.
It
I don't
just
know.
showed you that every single character is damaged because even Robby, he's having to struggle with PTSD from COVID. But
It's not PTSD from COVID. He's lost his mentor, which is very similar to losing his mentor in ER.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's very, very obvious that the person from ER also did this show. Not only with the amount of vocab terms that they keep throwing out there, but again, the same type of structure in terms of hours and time.
We're going to talk about the elephant in the room pretty soon about that. But I did want to point out that the interns themselves, I think a show when it does this is doing the right thing. It's what Scrubs was wanting to do in season 9 when it said, let's bring in our known cast and then have them treat the newbies
Dave
like
Franco.
themselves, like a reboot. That's effectively what this is, but this succeeds where that failed. I would also say it shows a complete contrast to what Brilliant Minds did, where those interns were also smart alecky, but they were pugnacious and they were children. They literally could not be hospital workers. I despised watching that pilot because of how they acted towards one another. They were so high school. And then Grey's Anatomy, if you remember Grey's Anatomy in early 2000s, it actually, I think, won it won the best show.
Talking about like the first two or three
seasons.
seasons. Yeah.
It was a serious show. Yes, it had romance, but it was a serious show about how these like doctors become doctors in their first couple of years. And that is very similar to this. And so I was just like, it's nice to see that come full round circle. And even Meredith Grey, the main character of that, her mom at the beginning is this really famous doctor. And so she's in her shadow. That's part of the storyline there. So seeing that kind of pulled in here, you're going to get a lot of stuff that you've seen, recurring themes, some dumb stuff, but overall it's so easy to look past it when you have information hitting you at a mile a minute. And yeah, so overall, before we talk about whether or not this is ER or if it's its own separate thing, what did you give it?
Thankfully, there was no romantic talk, as you were talking about. Noah Wyle is great. I think that the whole cast is. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It's a lot like Disclaimer, where it's like even the backgrounds, even though it's all set in this one hospital, I feel like there's so much that you can just grasp, even just from what you're seeing in the shots. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I could probably go higher, but I'm just reserving judgment for now. I want to see how the rest of the season does, but this is a very, very strong start.
I'm absolutely going to watch the rest of the show. I would give it a 7.5. Right now, it's an 8.2 on IMDb. It's 92% on audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Few are willing to say that it's better than ER, but many seem to want to defend that it's not ER, you know? So the showrunner worked on ER. The executive producer, also director of the first episode, and also created Shameless, if you're curious. He is also a big part of this show. So Michael Crichton's widow sued them. I think everybody knows this. Soon, I think a few years ago, when it was heard that they had pitched an ER reboot and then reconstructed it when she didn't give them permission to do so. And then they pulled this out. The question really is, if you're going to gauge whether or not this is ER based on would this show exist without ER, with the show creator and the executive producer and Noah Wyle, it's a firm no.
Yeah, easily.
If the question is how similar it is to ER, they're pretty similar. But if the question is it the same, slapping fresh faces onto a 2025 quasi reboot, that's where I would say no.
Yeah.
And Do you want to answer why first?
Well, I felt like this is darker. This is TVMA and this is HBO. I originally
this
did.
is HBO. Yes.
I wasn't really ready for it because I thought that it was going to be kind of just. I knew it was a medical show and we had just gotten done with one. But when I saw that it was on Max, I was like, oh, okay, this might change my mind. So that's why I feel like they're so different.
Well, it's same Warner Bros. Owns both, well, ER and this, just later
But
on.
one was broadcaster, one was cable, and one is literally Max.
ER would show some pretty damn stuff. Like it could get dark. But I agree so much as that ER has now been off the air for 15 years. It's the same amount of time that it's been off the air that it was on the air. Mm-hmm. So in total, like 30 years, right? You've got, there's no telling of how it would have adapted had it stayed on. Higher tech, post-COVID, new generations of people. But you can tell from 1994 to 2009, the format of ER stayed relatively steady, despite helicopters starting to fall on people. You could tell you were watching the same show if you just tuned into one episode in season 15 to season 1, right? Mm-hmm. That's completely different here. The format is distinct enough where you can say that these are different characters, and I think it benefits from not being ER, not being tied down. I will buy into the showrunners and also Wiley's proclamation about that. They've said as much because they were like, how are we going to bring in all these other characters and pay fan service, but at the same time create something new?
Right.
And it's like, drop all that stuff. By not having John Carter and however many years he was on the show, 12 or 15, that canon that was like tied to him, it doesn't bog you down. You know, like we can watch his character here and immediately know like what sort of doctor he is because he's similar enough in that regard. But we don't need to know his entire backstory because that will just cloud everything that we see. And we're going to like, oh, that doesn't fit his character from this. And it's like, it doesn't matter because it's a different person now. And so I also like that they weren't in 15 hours. You can't have a full love story take space. So we're not getting that. And if there's any specific storyline you want to talk about, this would be the time.
I think the only thing I would say about the show, negative, is that the endings were very abrupt. Like I felt like
there was some preachy moments for sure.
But it just felt like they just ended there. Like I was enjoying what I was watching, and then suddenly out of nowhere, it would just end. Like even
that's what made me want to watch the next episode, though.
Yeah, but they weren't even really to me like enticing enough. It was just kind of like, okay, this is first hour. Now let's go on to the next one. That's kind of where I was drawing the 24 connection from.
Yeah, my thing would have been like if you are to like nitpick, I would say when the lady comes in with sickle cell. And then you have one doctor having to comment on the medical student, not realizing that this person isn't just trying to fight for drugs. Like
He's in serious pain.
Yeah. And then she gives like a full monologue of like, oh, you don't understand how terrible sickle cell is in front of everybody in the hospital. That was a little preachy. I also thought that it's funny in ER, there's several times in that storyline where the doctors override a DNR. They just kind of ignore it because they're like, I've talked to this patient. They want to live. And this time we get the opposite where like Dr. Robby is so intent on following the DNI. He did not want to incubate this patient. Yeah. He did not want to treat them for pneumonia because they're super old. They have Alzheimer's and it's not what they really would have wanted. However, it feels like he really guilt tripped that family to a point where, I mean, how in the 2 hours that he's had, if he continues at this rate, he's just going to send them to an early grave because they're going to be so depressed.
And I think that the disgruntled teen was also probably the storyline out of all of them that just didn't really fit.
Didn't hit.
Didn't understand why it was in the show.
I can totally see it happening like once in a while, like that a mom would, under the guise of feeling sick, bring her kid there because she didn't want to bring him to the police or report him for anything, saying, I found these journals. It says he might be he might be killing all these girls.
He might plan to. But Robby running out after him, like that was just, to me, probably the most soap opera that the show got.
Right. I also hope they don't spend the next 13 episodes too much in the past because the storyline of COVID, we all lived through it. I don't want it to turn into Doc Odyssey or whatever, where it was like these weird backflash things. He's going to see his mentor, right?
Yes.
Adamson. And he's going to feel that like heat because it's 3 years since that person passed away. And this is the first day that he's worked that shift. Now I'm wondering, considering how needed he is in these 2 episodes, who would have taken that shift if he had not been there.
Yeah.
Would it have been the guy that we saw in the first scene that was standing on top of the roof, I think just taking a smoking break? You
Again,
think he was
Jack
about to
Abbott.
jump? Yeah, but I hope that they don't linger too far in the past, because I really like what they're doing right now. And I really want to see the growth of the interns and figure out the stories of even the nurses were kind of interesting, you know? Like when I think one of my favorite scenes was when the brash intern was making fun of the person for fainting, right? And then you look over and the nurses are just watching, like just really, and then they make a bet on who's going to slap each other first.
It made it seem like there were a lot of clicks, because whenever anything that was very intense was going on,
But you see St. Denis Medical, you see Scrubs, and there are a lot of clicks. Like that's the way it is. It's that actually exists, which is kind of funny.
It's just
and then
funny.
you also watch Lenox Hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Lenox Hill being real. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the nurses talk like that, you know, they'll talk like that. And then the doctors also have their like tight little knit groups and make fun of each other every once in a while. They do tend to be friendlier in real life than what you see on TV. But yeah, I don't think we've done too many other shows like this, except for The Bear, like you pointed out. High stakes, high fast-paced dialogue scenarios where everybody's running around all the time. Those are fun. And the camera work, people were saying it's not like ER. They used to follow them around, while this, you have like kind of stationary shots while it's happening. I didn't find that affected the show at all. Like
I didn't even realize it, really.
Right. Next episode is 9 a.m. and that will be on Thursday. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.